Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Kellen with Apex Archery, where we aim to bring you the most comprehensive and in-depth archery gear reviews. We're kicking off our reviews of longer axle-to-axle 2024 flagship bows with the Hoyt RX-8 Ultra. Let's get into it. We are going to be reviewing the almost 35-inch axle-to-axle Hoyt RX-8 Ultra. This is a new bow for Hoyt as of 2024 with a carryover, the same riser design that we had seen with the RX-7 Ultra design. So brand new limb system as well as brand new cam system that I'm very excited to tell you about, but a carryover from that very successful RX-7 Ultra riser. Before we go any further, I just need to give a quick shout out and thank you to Bear Creek Archery from Inglewood, Colorado. Without their support and frankly without them loaning me the bows for all of these reviews, it wouldn't be possible. It is a family owned and run shop here on the Front Range in Colorado. I trust them for all of my bow builds, all of my arrow building. If you're in the Front Range, Colorado, or even if you're traveling through, I highly recommend you go check out Bear Creek Archery. All right, so let's get into this bow. Again, as mentioned, brand new kind of engine, so new limb and HPX exact cam system on that same riser carried over from previous years. Claimed system weight, once you remove the stabilizer that does come with this bow, of 4.4 pounds, which we will check into. 34.688 inches, almost 35 inches axle to axle, with a brace height of 7 1/16. They are claiming an ATA speed of 332 feet per second, so that should be checked, in my opinion, at 30 inches, 70-pound draw weight, 350 grain arrow, and I like to shoot that in the 80% let-off position, which we'll do here in a little bit. So very quickly, before we step out on the range, let's go ahead and verify some of the measurements coming out of the factory from Hoyt. If I check center of axle to center of axle on this guy, I am getting the exact measurement that they had suggested. It's about 34.7 inches, so coming in pretty much exact. Verifying the brace height, going to the center of the string from the deepest part of the throat of the grip, I am getting exactly 7 1/16 inches, so really good and generous brace height there. The next thing I'm going to check into is the actual riser length. One thing that I love to see is a longer riser relative to the axle to axle. I call that the riser to axle ratio. The bigger that number, the more stable I find those bows to be, because it's really getting the mass of that bow out away from your hands. Think of the riser almost like your vertical position stabilizer for that bow at full draw. So if I check very quickly from the last point that the limbs actually make contact with the system or with the riser, I am getting about 31 1/8 inches. That gives us a riser to axle ratio of 89.9, or just a scotch under 90%. So this should be incredibly stable and accurate as far as how it shoots. Really quickly, let's go ahead while we're doing that and let's just get a reflex measurement on this. Again, that's going to help tell you how accurate that bow is going to be, and how forgiving, even if there is a little bit of hand torque introduced. So measuring there from the last point that the limbs are really kind of pivoting on the bow to the deepest point of the grip, I am getting bang on about 1.5 inches. So 1.5 inches of reflex, which should make this a relatively generous and forgiving platform, all things considered. Next, let's go ahead and check the actual weight of the bow to see if we're coming in close to their 4.4 claimed. Putting this on the hand scale, I am getting 4.68 pounds exactly. So 4.68 is what we're coming in at. About 3/10 over what they're claiming, but not out of line with what we're seeing from a lot of the bow manufacturers as far as their claimed weights. We did go ahead and check the outside of kind of the limb. What is the actual width of the limb stance there? I got 2 3/4 inches on the calipers. A lot of the bow companies are doing wider and wider limbs, claiming that's going to make it significantly more stable at full draw. We'll have to wait a little bit later to actually verify the speeds. The next thing I'm going to do though is throw a rest on this guy, get it out on the range, do a couple of arrows worth of shooting, and really tell you guys how I think all those specs come together into shooting performance within this package. Okay, stepping out on the range now with the Hoyt RX-8 Ultra. I want to run a few arrows through this guy
really just to get a sense for how all of those specs come together and how does this thing actually feel in terms of shooting performance. First thing I'll say is really nice draw angle, very comfortable string angle. Yeah, really, really nice. Stacks very evenly for what I would think is about the first 25 or 30% of the draw. Then it feels like it stays incredibly stable through that initial part of the draw cycle without too much of a dump into the back wall. Next, I'm really going to kind of grip the riser on this one to see if I can get a sense for that felt vibration. Really nice string angle there. Little bit of residual vibration that you do feel. It feels kind of like a little bit of a buzz in the front of that riser. That said, not too bad. I think once you load it up with all of your accessories, your quiver, your sight, your rest, I don't really think it's going to be that noticeable. And I do have this now in the softer of the two back wall settings, so we'll talk for just a moment about that back wall on this third and final shot. Maybe like 2 millimeters of give. Yeah, I actually find that that's relatively firm regardless. I personally like just a teeny bit of sponge if I get off that the string stop version. It allows me to really kind of preload that trigger and do that kind of true pull through surprise shot that I'm ultimately looking for. That said, I think if you're looking for that ultra firm backwall feeling, I would encourage you to try it in the firmer of the two settings. But all things considered, really impressive shooting platform from Hoyt this year.
All right, we are back inside from the range. Now we've got this pulled on our draw board into the dynamic setting, or how that bow is going to actually feel in that full draw setting. I want to do a couple of additional measurements here and see if I can get to the bottom of how it is that I got such a wonderful performance out of this bow. So the first thing that I'm going to measure is the actual limb deflection. How much does the axle to axle change at full draw when we've kind of got it in here from center of axle to center of axle? So measuring from center to center, we are coming in at exactly 32 inches of total axle to axle length when we've got this at full draw, meaning we're only losing about 2 3/4 inches of actual deflection in the limbs as this thing goes back. The next thing I want to see is what is the string to string angle and the string to string measurement at full draw. That's the point where the string first begins to kind of curve on the cam here. So if I line that up, I am seeing about 35.5 inches of string to string on this bow. Using our protractor here, let's see if we can actually get an angle measurement as far as what's that string angle going to be at full draw. And again, the more generous the string angle, the easier it is to kind of keep that upright head position. The easier it is also to get your nose on string if that's one of your touch points. And I'm getting about 41.7 degrees for the string angle. Again, this is set to that 30-inch mark as far as the draw length is concerned. So really a pretty generous string angle. The next thing I want to check and just reference really quickly here is what is our actual draw length. So when I do the measurement from the throat of the grip on up, this is crossing at exactly 28.25 inches. We add 1 3/4 inches to that to get our AMO draw length. This one is coming in at bang on for exactly 30 inches of draw in that 30-inch position. We did also have a chance to measure off screen the actual hold and the let off then. This again was set to exactly 70 pounds for all of our speed testing and our shooting out on the range. I was getting a holding weight of about 16.4 pounds in the 80% let off position. So that's coming in a little bit closer to 77, 78% let off, but really pretty close to that 80% number that we would expect. Last but not least, we did have a chance to throw this also through the dyno. So we generated an actual draw force curve. One of the things that we came up with was a total area underneath that curve of 1,181 what we're calling inch pounds, or kind of the total force added up per inch of draw all across that draw curve. One thing that was really interesting, Hoyts are notorious for an incredibly smooth draw, and you can actually see on the chart that that's because it stacks in a very linear fashion for about the first 25 to 30% before really getting close to or reaching that peak draw weight. It stays very even then through a full half, the full kind of middle 50% of that actual draw before finally dumping off very gradual and in a fairly linear fashion as well. Ultimately, that means that it doesn't pull too hard at the beginning, it stays very even through the entire middle, and it drops off very gradually at the end. That's what ultimately makes it feel like a very smooth shooting bow. So with all of that out of the way, let me go ahead and grab some 350 grain arrows and some other weights as well. Let's step out on the range and see what kind of speeds we're getting out of this platform.
All right, we're stepping out on the range now with the Hoyt RX-8 Ultra. Going to put a couple of weighted arrows through this guy to see what kind of speeds we're able to get. Right before this test, we did go ahead and check. This is pulling at exactly 70 pounds of peak draw weight, set to 80% let off with a 30-inch draw. This first arrow is match weighted to exactly 350 grains. Let's see what we get. 321.3 feet per second, which is bang on the average that we had gotten by shooting 3 different 350 grain arrows through. Next up is a 400 grain arrow. This is actually an arrow that I shot at TAC last year, so really kind of a nice indication for what you might get if you're shooting a 3D setup. That came in at 304 feet per second exactly. And then this is an airstrike coming in at exactly 450 grains, probably much more indicative of what people could just expect to get when they've got that true hunting weight arrow coming out of their bow. (284.4 feet per second). Not bad. Only coming in about 11 feet per second under what Hoyt is advertising for an ATA speed with a true 70-pound draw, 80% let off with a 350 grain arrow.
All right, we are back in from outside and getting really some pretty good speeds out of the Hoyt RX-8 Ultra. As I had mentioned on camera, we had actually done some preliminary speed testing. I had shot 3 different 350 grain arrows through this guy. We were getting an average there of 321.4 feet per second, so coming in about 10.5 feet per second under what Hoyt had advertised. That said, let's now dive into some of the features and specs and really talk about who is this bow for. So you'll notice it is a carryover of the exact same riser design from the RX-7 Ultra, but with an all-new limb package and cam design, so really a new motor to this guy. You're going to get peak draw weights ranging from 50, 60, 65, 70, and 80 pounds, all done with ordering different limbs for this cam system. They've also moved to a new through-axle system as it relates to how they're actually mounting the cams to those limbs, doing away with the E-clips that they had done before. I know a lot of the shop owners, a lot of the at-home bow mechanics are very much going to appreciate how much easier it is to work on this through-axle system and those metal shims that you can do for your left-right paper adjustments. Now let's talk about the actual cams themselves. The HBX Exact cam is going to offer you 27 to 32 inches of draw length adjustment across 3 different mods instead of 1 rotating mod that comes with this system. So it should be significantly more efficient at each of those different draw lengths. Additionally, they are offering now 1/4 inch adjustments to that draw length. I know that for me personally, I'm very often in between that 29.5 and 30 inches of actual draw. It'd be really nice as I'm tying in new D loops, maybe trying out different releases to really be able to fine tune that with those 1/4 inch increment adjustments. So that would be really interesting there. They've also added this brand new little mod here for the let off. You can now actually get this in 75, 80, and 85% let off options, as well as with 2 different back wall settings. What is effectively kind of their hard and their extra hard setting. So if traditionally you found that maybe there's a little bit too much give in that back wall from Hoyt, I would encourage you to try one of these guys and maybe put it in that firmer of the 2 settings. Moving up the riser a little bit, we should talk about the grip. They're carrying forward their Vital Point grip. Traditionally, I prefer more of a slimmer off the riser or target style grip. That said, I have extensive experience shooting the Vital Point grip on the RX-7 Ultra. I actually find it to be very repeatable. The contours fit nicely to my hand, which is about a size large in gloves. It creates a really nice contour where you can get a really repeatable kind of thumb position, and I don't find that I was having too many torquing issues, even with that softer and wider grip. As it relates to the rest mounting interface, carrying forward from years past with that dovetail coming off the back, machined piece of aluminum in that carbon riser. So lots of different options from the folks at QAD and elsewhere for inline rest mounts for this bow. Similarly, Hoyt is carrying forward and championing the Picatinny rail mount system for their sight mounting options. Plenty of options from most manufacturers, again, to really kind of bring all of that mass to the center of that bow. Let's talk about noise and vibration dampening for a second. So one thing that Hoyt did away with to try to, I think, carve out a little bit of weight from this riser is with the new wider limbs, they just did away entirely with the rubber vibration dampeners that go in between those limbs. You could always throw some on there and add that little bit of weight back in there, but they do not come from the bow as stock anymore. I did feel a little bit of residual vibration. Again, it was dissipating over about 1.5 to 2 seconds, and it was kind of a definitive buzz that I could feel on those fingers, even as I was just kind of like loosely holding that bow with a good shooting hand. So not ultimately a huge deal. I think once you throw your stabilizers, sight, your rest on there, I don't think that it's going to be too much of an issue, but it is there. And when we did shoot this thing outside with our sound meter, we got 78.1 decibels. And that was with our sound meter, again, outside and distance exactly 3 feet from the shooting surface of this bow. So 78.1 decibels. I'll be very curious to see how that stacks up against the rest of the field, as a lot of the bow companies are beginning to focus on noise as one thing that they're trying to improve every single year. As it relates to the rest of the features of this bow, Hoyt is carrying forward their dual stabilizer position. It also does come with the stubby stabilizer in the box, so you can choose to shoot a front bar off of 2 different mounting positions, and then you can use their V-bar mount if you want to shoot a back bar here as well. And last but not least, Hoyt has completely reworked their go sticks. So there is another mounting surface down here beneath that lower stabilizer position where you can add those go sticks. That's going to create your first 2 contact points off the front of the bow, and then they've actually machined into the cam itself this little metal outsert, if you will, with a rubber gasket. That actually creates your 3rd point of contact, so that when you're setting your bow down with those go sticks attached, that's where it's actually touching the ground, rather than setting it directly on the cam and the string in that string channel. Keeping a little bit of dirt and things like that out of that system, hopefully improving the longevity of your string set. So with all of that, that is the Hoyt Carbon RX-8 Ultra for 2024. This bow is MSRPing for $2,049, so a pretty steep sticker price, but a really, really killer package. Remember, you are paying for that carbon riser and for a little bit of that weight difference that you're going to see between the RX-8 lineup and some of their other aluminum flagship bows, which are going to carry over the exact same cam and limb systems. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. Also, feel free to share it with all of your friends and family, anyone that you think would benefit from it. We're getting ready to do a lot of bow reviews, again, really starting with those longer axle-to-axle flagship hunting bows for the year. We're going to ultimately wrap up here in a couple of weeks or months with a review of reviews, where every single spec, everything that I was able to get out of all of these bows in testing is going to be compared directly and head-to-head, and we're going to name our first Apex Archery Bow of the Year for 2024. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next one.